hey, hey, ho, ho, welcome to the show. Hey, 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 ho, ho, welcome. Alright.
Welcome, everyone, to the Good Mythical Morning Iceberg. So, if you guys didn't know, I recently released a video detailing the history of Good Mythical Morning and analyzing it from Good Morning Chia Lincoln all the way up to GMM Season 20. Therefore, I have a lot of information and tidbits that most of it I didn't get to put into the video because I had to put a stop on the script somewhere. But, there's a lot of information, and I thought I'd always wanted to do an iceberg video. So, why don't I make a Good Mythical Morning iceberg? I looked it up and it doesn't seem like anyone ever made a Good Mythical Morning iceberg, so before we get into this, I thought it'd probably be a good idea to let you all know how I formatted this iceberg. So basically, the first couple tiers are just going to be introducing surface level basic information that's going to come into play in the later entries. So if you think I'm going a little quick and I'm not giving a lot of detail, especially in these first entries, that's most likely why. To give you all an example about what I mean, you all may know about the controversies surrounding the International Taste Test Good Mythical Morning episodes. Well, before we can talk about those controversies, we need to first introduce Chase, we need to introduce the International Taste Test episode format, and we need to talk about Link's history with Sharp Things. Then, after all of that, we can finally go into the specific controversies. I'm just doing this so I don't have to repeat previous information and step on the toes of later entries. So for example, I want to just introduce who Chase is and how long he's been at Good Mythical Morning, instead of talking about the more obscure controversies he's been a part of. This is also why I'm going to split this into 3 separate parts and not just upload the full iceberg, because I need to make sure I'm saying enough information in these basic tiers. That way in the later tiers, I'm not having to re-explain myself or explain more than I think I should have to in the later tiers, because I want to have it focus more on the specific entry and not the basic information that you should have gotten back here. This is because I don't know exactly what I'm going to say for every single entry, and so I want to go back and make sure I'm saying the right stuff and see how the audience is responding to stuff, and then I'll make sure that I'm giving the detail needed in the later entries, if that makes sense. That being said, let me know if I got anything wrong, or if you'd like some more detail on some of these entries, especially on these entry layers, or if you'd like some additional entries added, really, because I'm obviously going to do a supercut episode at the end and include the stuff that you all suggest. This is going to be a different kind of video, really, not super edit intensive, more of a listen in the background kind of thing. So just relax and do some housework, eat your Texas Roadhouse takeout, whatever you want to do, and let us begin with Tier 1, Discovery. So this first tier is just going to cover the very, very basic stuff about Good Mythical Morning. Everything you need to know if you literally don't know anything about this show. That's how these iceberg videos work. Is that, I want to start with the very basic stuff. So, Rhett McLaughlin and Link Neal. This is going to be our first lore entry on the iceberg, and the most basic thing you need to know about Good Mythical Morning. These two have been lifelong friends and have been doing internet stuff since the beginning. I'm going to try not to go into too much detail about them, since this is not going to be a Rhett and Link iceberg, but there'll be some tidbits along the way, such as Rhett is tall. He is tall. This is one of the most basic things to know about the Rhett and Link duo, is that Rhett is a particularly tall guy. I think he's 6'6". He's a pretty tall guy. A couple inches taller than most folks, at least. And this is a pretty iconic trait about him. Rhett and Link are musicians. Another very basic fact, both Rhett and Link cut their teeth on the internet in the music scene. Their main channel, Rhett and Link, just hosts a bunch of music stuff that they made, which we aren't going to really cover, but this also explains the kind of musical guitar-y theme on Good Mythical Morning, and they play a lot of music on the show, so. Rhett and Link are married. The final basic fact to know about Rhett and Link is that they are married to their wives. That's right, whom they mention them time to time on the show. They are married. Food videos. Most folks who know about GMM know about it from its food videos. They kind of just assume they just make food videos. It didn't always used to be this way, but that's the thing people know GMM for, especially for the Willets. The Willets are the most iconic series on the show by far. This is where Rhett and Link eat a variety of foods with a peculiar spin on them. This started with Will It Taco, but it's a series running even to this day. These can be anything from basic things like eating cheesy broccoli on tacos, and can go into more nutty things like stuffing a Long John with Rhett and Link Value Select shaving cream. This kind of goes into the next entry, which is Rhett and Link Just Eat Gross Things. This is the first community entry on the Iceberg. These community entries basically mean that they're just ideas that the community and the zeitgeist of humans have on the show. And this is the most basic thing that people will say about the show if they aren't particularly huge fans. They basically just see thumbnails that say, will it pig anus or something? And then just assume that Good Mythical Morning exists for Rhett and Link to eat a bunch of messed up weird food. Someone who's a big fan of the show probably doesn't think that this is what it is, but the main thing that the normies will think about the show is that it's just Rhett and Link eating gross things. So let's talk about that. Good Mythical Morning's iconic catchphrase. They say it at the beginning of basically every single episode, even though at one point they cut it off for a little bit, but we'll get into that much deeper in the Iceberg. For now, just assume that this is the thing they say at the beginning of every single Good Mythical Morning episode. At one point they had fans say the iconic intro, but that was changed to the fans saying the intro to the Wheel of Mythicality. This is a staple of Good Mythical Morning since the very beginning. Basically, you spin the wheel, and at the end of the episode, do whatever the wheel tells you to do. Before each spin, the introductory phrase, "It's time to spin the Wheel of Mythicality," is spoken, which precedes the phrase, "You know what time it is," typically said by Rhett, Link, or a guest they have on the show. Speaking of guests, guest appearances. Many times it is not just our Rhett and Link fellas, sometimes a guest is sprinkled in for goofs and giggles. Sometimes the guest is well received and sometimes they aren't, but all that matters is that they are there. And there are a lot of guest episodes of Good Mythical Morning. Mythical crew and staff. No man is an island, and the same goes for our favorite morning show. Starting off, Good Mythical Morning only had one person, Jason, who just manned the camera and did all the extraneous stuff back when the show wasn't as complicated. However, they now have over 100 employees, Mythical Entertainment does. Many of these employees work directly on Good Mythical Morning. Games. Rhett and Link particularly enjoy making game videos as well. These game videos mostly involve food, but can sometimes be like a trivia thing. Generally, it'll be a competing thing, and whoever loses has something bad happen, and whoever wins has something good happen, but it's never like the person who loses gets something and the person who wins gets something at the same time. It's always just a, one and done kind of thing. And if they tie, it's generally that they both fail and they both get the bad thing, which kind of, sucks, but it makes sense logistically. So yeah, they play a lot of games on the show. If you don't know them for their food, you probably know them for their games, but I would think you'd know them for their food a little more. Good Mythical Morning is running out of ideas. This is our first theory on the Iceberg, one that can be easy to ascertain as the prominence of over 1,000 episodes of Good Mythical Morning have released since 2012. And Rhett and Link have basically been making an episode every single day with only a 2 to 3 month break every year and a break on the weekends back in the day. They've really got to run out of ideas eventually, but thankfully with the advent of series and episode topics based off of years, cultures, and history, they'll probably have ideas up until they've gone through every single decade of history, every single culture in existence, and every single sport idea that's around today. So it's fair to say Rhett and Link will probably be long dead before that happens. Rhett and Link met in the first grade. Another well-known piece of Rhett and Link lore. Basically, their entire YouTube persona is them having met in first grade and have been friends ever since. The story is that they were told to stay inside after lunch for writing profanity on their desks and had to color things in their coloring book. Now, on interviews and stuff, they say they were coloring mythical beasts, which is where the whole mythical aesthetic came from. But in an episode of Ear Biscuits, it's confirmed that the mythical beast thing probably wasn't 100% true, though they were coloring and did meet in first grade, according to them. The Rhett and Link community. This describes basically you and me. Well, I mean, I don't know you, but given the fact I've already made a video on Good Mythical Morning, it's fair to say I would be a part of this community, or this thing. So, in short, yeah, it's the community of Rhett and Link, which is why it's like Rhett and Link community with the K spelling out the community. Over the years, they've been given a lot less prominence in the specific videos, but they've migrated from their original 2005 looking website to all reaches of the internet and social media. Whether the page goes by that name or not, they are still a part of the Rhett and Link community. And it's pronounced Rhett and Link community without a space after Link. So, just so you know. Mythical Beasts. This is the name that's been given to fans of Good Mythical Morning, with the name actually coming from the community itself, which Rhett and Link tasked itself with naming. This is coming between Randlers and Mythical Beasts. Rhett and Link thought that the Mythical Beasts were a better name because it focused less on themselves and more on the community itself, but the Randler was not forgotten because Randler. The Randler, which is a weird squirrel-looking thing with wings and antlers, is a mascot of the community and the Mythical Beasts. You'll see this on merch, hidden in the intro, and referenced throughout the GMM set. Now you may be wondering how Randlers was focused on Rhett and Link. Well, the reason it's called a Randler is because it's like Rhett, so R and L-er, which is like Rhett and Link-ers. So Randler still comes up from time to time, and it was not forgotten. Belvedere the Cockatrice. The final main mythical beast of the cast, this guy makes an appearance in every single Good Mythical Morning intro. It's basically a fire-breathing rooster with wings and the tail of a dragon. And unlike the Dragon's Dogma Cockatrice, which just petrifies you and, kills you, it brings good luck and rouses the mythical beasts to, quote, promise prosperity in a new episode of Good Mythical Morning. Tier 2, Examination. So this tier goes a little more in depth into Good Mythical Morning. This will be the tier that most casual fans will know about. And yeah, if you are a fan of Good Mythical Morning, you'll probably know most of these. So start paying attention now. I guess. I actually paid attention before, but... Ear Biscuits. Starting off on Tier 2, we have the Rhett and Link Side podcast channel where they discuss things at length. This started off as a place to interview guests, but became more of a venting grounds for Rhett and Link as they began to become more candid with their audience about themselves. Nowadays, it's kind of a continuation of the older episodes, where they would just talk about themselves and whatnot. Rhett and Link Stories. This is an absolute classic. Some of my favorite episodes were from these early seasons where they would just talk about previous happenings in their lives. They obviously had to stop doing this eventually, at least on the main show, just because they would eventually run out of things to talk about and want to actually do things. Like I said, if you want more Rhett and Link personal stories and thoughts, just listen to that Ear Biscuits podcast. Good Mythical More. This is a segment that's been running since Season 4, basically just an additional less structured and more relaxed segment that happens after the main episode. In recent times, they've started to feature the crew more and have started to have their own little segments running, but the charm of Good Mythical More was always its relaxed and easygoing nature. Stevie. Stevie's a longtime crew member turned creative officer of Good Mythical Morning. You're going to hear her voice in many episodes that she was a part of, and she was on the show since 2013. She has only gained more prominence as the show has continued, but she also runs a show called Let's Talk About That. Not to be confused with the opening intro catchphrase thing, this was basically a weekend show about Good Mythical Morning that tended to focus on behind the scenes goings-ons and extra segments. This ran for about a season on the Good Mythical Morning main channel throughout season 15, but it was then brought back after fan interest was renewed, though it only ran on a platform we won't mention until the next layer. Chase. Chase is another longtime crew member who's been part of the show since 2014, so just a little bit less time than Stevie. He started with designing props and sets and whatnot in the beginning, but quickly rose through the ranks to become a producer, then a senior producer, then a supervising producer, then a senior supervising producer. He makes many appearances on the show as the guy that's basically forced into all the silly costumes, but he also used to make all the foods for the Willets before another crew member came along. And a fun fact, his grandma was also a wrestler, and is currently not alive, so rest in peace Latin Hellcat. Josh, the mythical chef of Good Mythical Morning, basically deemed the executive producer of culinary content these days, but he started off in 2017 being the guy who made all the foods for the Willets and other food-based programs, once that became more of a staple of the channel. Since Chase was a props guy, I guess they used to think of food as props, which is kind of weird. But anyway, Josh has become a mainstay on the channel and even has a show of his own. Mythical Kitchen, a Good Mythical Morning side channel focusing on the food side of Good Mythical Morning, featuring various food-based segments including making celebrities' last meals and making expensive versions of fast food. A pretty interesting and known channel if you peruse Good Mythical Morning, but its impact on the show ends there. If you care so much, go make a Mythical Kitchen Iceberg or something. International Taste Test. This is a more recent staple of the show. This has Rhett and Link tasting food from other countries and trying to guess where they originated. The gimmick, however, is the fellas have to throw darts at a large map and hit the country they believe the food is from. The distance from the dart to the correct answer is then measured by our favorite senior supervising producer Chase, and whoever has the lowest score wins, so it's like golf rules. Food Feuds, a standard head-to-head between two food places, which tests various comparable products and ranks them each on a score of 1 to 10, with Rhett and Link being able to give different scores, so it's different than the Willets, where they both have to agree if it Willets or doesn't, even though sometimes they don't. But the scores are then tallied at the end, with the higher score winning the chance to sponsor a Good Mythical Morning episode, which I guess they could have before, but it's kind of like a symbolic victory, I guess. Gut checks. This is more of a quick fire comparison of a bunch of different products in a product line. Every product is ranked by each fella in a similar vein to the Food Feud videos, but this time it's a score out of 100. At the end, all the scores are compared to each other, and the best of the product is determined. Pretty cut and dry with no extra segments, just them two tasting a bunch of different stuff and giving their thoughts. Running jokes. Alright, so this is just a blanket entry just to encapsulate the existence of many running jokes throughout the series, some of which we'll go into later, but any show running this long with this amount of personality put into it will have at least a few running jokes. Good Mythical Morning is scripted. So this is basically true and false at the same time. They have scriptwriters and they have segments that are supposed to happen, unless you think Chase just serendipitously happens to be wearing his Easter Bunny outfit when it would be most convenient for the show for him to be wearing it. But the words they say are generally not scripted. There were some points later down the line where they were a bit too tight, but generally the show is just scripted segments with improvised reactions, so kind of true and kind of not. Dink it and sink it. A classic running line or gag thing that Rhett and Link say when they both have to eat something, but only when they themselves are holding the food. To explain, like, in the Gatorade gut check, they obviously didn't dink and sink every single drink because they were being fed the drink. At least that's my interpretation. They may just do it whenever they feel like it, but regardless, they both tap their foods together, i.e. the dink, and then eat it, i.e. the sink. Not too complicated, but just a fun running thing that they put on mugs and t-shirts and whatnot. Link is a very picky eater. To follow up on the Dink It and Sink It entry, we have Link, and specifically his pickiness. After the Dink It and Sink It line is spoken, we have generally about 50% chance that it'll be followed only with the sounds of Link gagging. Rhett generally has an easier time eating gross things, though there have been moments where Link has gotten the best of him. There also seems to be an endless list of very specific things that Link doesn't like, which sometimes causes the audience to be annoyed at him, but it's all harmless. I mean, my man just doesn't like olives. What do you want from him? Link hates tomatoes. To stick with the Link hating food theming, we have the most known thing that Link hates, which are tomatoes. To clarify in more detail what I was saying in the previous entry about how specific he can get, he likes ketchup and tomato sauce and really anything with tomatoes baked into the tin, but he doesn't like tomatoes being on things specifically, like sandwiches, tacos, etc. This is a classic fact that's even mentioned in the season 24 intro of the show, so Link does not like his tomatoes. Link loves cereal and peanut butter. Link does not solely have hate in his heart, however. He has a particular soft spot for peanut butter and frosted mini-wheats. Really anything that is peanut butter related he'll enjoy, and as proven in the Will It cereal episode, he tends to enjoy things more solely because they're in a cereal orientation. So like goldfish, even though he thought it tasted weird, he just likes goldfish and milk because they are kind of like cereal. Birthday episodes for Link and episodes where Link gets things he wants generally involves either peanut butter or cereal. And it also sometimes involves cookie dough, but not cookie dough with chocolate chips in it, which I honestly get 100% because they put way too many chocolate chips in cookie dough. This is completely a digression, but I just want to say I completely agree with Link on that. A chocolate chip cookie dough should not just only be chocolate chips. Rhett loves the McRib. Our final entry on our tour of the likes and dislikes of Rhett and Link food-wise, which is Rhett enjoying the McRib quite a bit, which is explored most heavily in the Deconstructing the McRib episode, but it comes up from time and time again. And here's another side note, I also love the McRib, so I understand when Rhett can't help but blurt out his undying love for the product. It's a McRibber thing, you guys just wouldn't get it. Rhett and Link are Southern boys. Rhett and Link both grew up in North Carolina, so they have a good deal of South in them, even though they've lived in California for quite some time. This comes up typically whenever one of them says something in a goofy way, and the other one repeats what they said in a Southern accent to be funny, or when someone mentions something like an obscure country music star, or some sort of hyper-specific experience that only someone out in the Carolinian boonies would understand. As you can see, we can't. Many times during activities that Rhett and Link are forced to participate in, Rhett and Link have to be blindfolded, so to indicate that they are in fact blindfolded, they say the phrase, "As you can see, we can't." They've done this since the beginning, so it's pretty much just ingrained in the GMM zeitgeist at this point. It doesn't even register as a joke anymore, it's just a thing you say when you're blindfolded. Jen. This is another well-known crew member, though this one left the show in 2019 to pursue other interests. She was apparently a social media manager and membership program person, but nonetheless, Jen has left a lasting impact on Good Mythical Morning, most prominently with Thursday Means Mail. The mail episodes of Good Mythical Morning. This has started season 2 and continues throughout the series for years to come. Mail episodes were mostly iconic though, during the years where Jen would be the designated mythical mail person. They begin the series with hot gluing things sent in together to make a boulder, which was eventually encased in bronze. Then they started a mythical mail museum, which you could see a live stream of, but that was discontinued, and then it just became them looking at some fan mail every once in a while. As I said though, Jen was a real draw. Link's hairstyle change. This is the first controversy of the show that we're going to discuss. Basically, starting season 9, Link had a completely different hairstyle than the one he used to have up until that point, which really came to a shock to some. I mean, I hate to admit it, but I was definitely one of the folks who didn't like his new hair, solely because it's different, but it's 100% grown on me now. Now he's had the hair longer on GMM than he hasn't, so no one really bats an eye at it, but if I remember correctly, he wanted to change his hair so it didn't look so youth pastory, and he thought it made him look like he was trying to seem young, so I guess it's understandable why he'd let it grow out. Boop, 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 boop. Boop, 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 boop. Research. Another running phrase that's said is when the fellows mention research they've done. Running as far back as season 1, it started because Rhett says his ears perk up when he says research like an alarm. Ironically, it was Link who does the boops because he says it was like a news station, but Rhett flatly says that he does not do that. But the boops were the thing that ended up sticking, so it became the theme of GMM research. They do it less now, mostly because they don't do much research themselves anymore, but I'm sure if an episode happens that they did research in a recent episode, they would probably still do the boops, so it wasn't like an intentional thing that they stopped. Mythical Summer. This was a summer segment of Good Mythical Morning, basically the same as a normal Good Mythical Morning, though with some summer-based activities and vibes, and they would only post a couple times a week, with some even having guest hosts. Historically, Rhett and Link and Good Mythical Morning have taken breaks throughout the summer, but since 2018, they've started posting some stuff during the summer. There's also a Good Mythical Weekend segment that started the crew during Mythical Summer 2023, which was kind of fun. A particular highlight in my opinion was when the Game Grumps hosted. Overall though, I understand why they do it, but I'm not someone who thinks there should always be new GMM content for all eternity, and I kind of used to appreciate them taking breaks. Boot Scootin' Boogie. Boot Scootin' Boogie is an iconic song by Brooks and Dunn that both Rhett and Link randomly became obsessed with when trying to remember the words to it in a Good Mythical More episode, playing adult Mad Libs. It really became popularized by clip channels and folks of the like using the clip in various GMM compilations, because the episode from whence it originated isn't even particularly popular. It's almost like that scene from The Office where Andy and Dwight start singing Country Roads and randomly get into it, You know, it's a fun time, and of course Rhett and Link are great at belting out songs randomly, so it's no wonder that even though it's only mentioned that one time, it became so iconic. This is the quickest and easiest way to capture the appeal of Good Mythical Morning. Rhett and Link aren't actually friends. This is a theory I believe is kind of disproven by the previous entry, but to go into it, folks believe that the whole Rhett and Link friendship thing is like Mythbusters, where Adam and Jamie never liked each other. It's really easy to think this kind of stuff because it's very convenient that they just happen to still be friends for so long, and just so happen to be so successful, but I think it's almost like a chicken and the egg situation. You know, folks say that they can't be good friends and have this good of chemistry, and have this once in a lifetime kind of partnership with your best friend, just because that never happens. And I really think they know that they have such great chemistry and work well together, and that's why they are such good friends in the first place. So stuff like the boot scoot and boogie in the previous entry are iconic moments that really can't come out of a writer's room. So I do think they actually are friends. Mythicon. This is a convention that happened in 2022 from October 28th to 30th in Austin, Texas, ran by the Mythical crew and Rhett and Link. It was pretty expensive, but I believe most thought it was well worth the price. With live shows and events and a weird dance party thing, it seemed like a really interesting time and a crazy experience for anyone who enjoys the whole mythical experience. I also found another Mythicon, but I think that's just a myth-based Renaissance fair thing, and it doesn't really have anything to do with Good Mythical Morning. Nonetheless, I just wanted to mention them since it seems kind of interesting. Rhett and Link's children. Rhett and Link both have children who all make appearances and are mentioned on the show frequently. Link has 3 children, Lily, Lincoln, and Lando, and Rhett only has 2 children, Locke and Shepard, which I mentioned in order of age. While Rhett's children have appeared as early as Season 2, opening mail with their father, it wouldn't be until Season 5 that we saw all of Link's children. Understandably, the older ones don't make many appearances, but Shepard and Lando have gained sort of a cult following, and they seem to be the ones who like being on Good Mythical Morning the most. Generally, they all seem to have their own thing going on, which is probably for the best. The youngest of them would be 15 and 14 at this point, so if I were to presume, they probably don't want to be attached at the heel of their father's internet show anymore. Charles Neal. Keeping with the theme of family, we have Link's dad Charles, who has appeared on the show pretty frequently, partially because Link and his father have a podcast called Dispatches from Myrtle Beach. Besides videos about Rhett and Link's dads, Charles has appeared in some food feuds and as the host of the Crazy Cookie Roulette Challenge. He's pretty universally loved and does a surprisingly good job on camera, so. Good Mythical Morning April Fool's videos. On April Fools, GMM generally does a special kind of video that you'd expect for the holiday. On the earlier seasons, they would just talk about April Fool's stuff like a normal episode, but later down the line they started making the episodes themselves the jokes, such as having the whole episode in Spanish, tasting invisible food, and my favorite, when the episode was about them spending $1 million at the dollar store in a game format, but they spent the entire episode explaining the complex rules of the game. They generally only do these kinds of videos if April Fool's Day lands on a day when they would do a GMM, so they don't always do one every year, which makes the GMM April Fool's videos pretty special. Post Malone. This is arguably one of the most iconic guests on Good Mythical Morning, just because of how well he fits in and the fact that he's actually a big fan of Good Mythical Morning, which you probably wouldn't expect. Because of this, he comes on the show pretty frequently, and he's almost universally loved by the community. Probably the best example of a good guest appearance on Good Mythical Morning, and fans have quickly accepted him into the GMM canon with open arms, unlike how they normally treat guest appearances. Rhett and Link are married. A little bit of a joke entry, but you'd probably be surprised with the amount of folks who think they're a couple just at a glance, most likely due to how much they are around each other and how they argue like an old married couple. Of course, with a cursory glance at Google, you'll find that it's not true, but I don't know, they seem to have to clarify that they're not married a lot, and it seems a little bit like they're protesting a little too much, if you know what I'm saying. Sporked. This is basically a grocery food ranking website started by Mythical Entertainment, and for a while it was pushed pretty heavily by GMM. It had a big impact on Good Mythical More, with many episodes including Jordan, Gwynedd, and Danny from Sporked, helping Rhett and Link rank random grocery store things on the moors. To clarify again, these happened on the moors, and not the main show, which was a little weird because the moors are generally supposed to be the intimate, less scripted part with just the crew and Rhett and Link, and if they had a guest on the main episode, then that guest as well. But these sporked moors would appear on many episodes that didn't have anything to do with them. Some fans didn't like sporked being pushed so heavily on the moors, but at the end of the day, it's still technically a mythical product, so it's not like they're just bringing in a random sponsor. However, it took away some of the intimate feel when they were present. We got vasectomies together. Another iconic episode of Good Mythical Morning. Basically what it says on the tin. They got vasectomies together. It was pretty hyped up and they talked about it a lot beforehand. And in the end, they did just that on Good Mythical Morning Season 12. It's brought up as one of those, whoa, look how crazy it is that they did that things a lot, but at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, they got vasectomies with each other in the room. It doesn't really seem that crazy or big of a deal to me. GMM is too corporate / out of touch. A running theme of what some in the community think. This is basically the idea that GMM started off as this nice, warm, intimate thing, and now it's just a big company that churns out clickbait thumbnails and ideas solely designed to be popular. And I think there's some truth to that, but definitely not to the extent some folks think it is. I mean, if they just wanted to make as much money as possible, they could be doing a lot crazier stuff, and they wouldn't care about the community opinion as much as they do. That being said, of course they're trying to make videos that get popular more so when they were in Season 2, just because this is how the nature of this stuff works. I talk about this in depth in my analysis video, so I'll keep it at that, but yeah, it's a pretty common opinion that crops up every now and again. GMM hashtag war. This is a fun trilogy and community outreach thing that happened in Season 4. Rhett and Link find that their hashtag GMM is competing on Twitter with Good Morning Memphis and Good Morning Maryland, so send their fans to tweet at the news stations telling them to change their hashtag since hashtag GMM is already taken. It ends up with GMM taking the hashtag and the news stations changing their hashtags after some concessions are made, the foremost being that Rhett and Link made news jingles for both of them. But sadly, neither news channel really ended up using the Rhett and Link jingles, but they mentioned it on their news stations and everything ended up nicely. Strangely enough, Maryland asked for a lock of both Rhett and Link's hair, so I guess they also got that. You're So Loud. This is the most popular and well-known GMM compilation channel. This basically started the whole trend of making GMM compilations, and she was pretty widely accepted by the community, even being mentioned in an episode of LTAT. But she stopped making videos and quit in 2020 after Jenna Marbles was cancelled for doing blackface. Not really like the shoe polish blackface, but more like impersonating Nicki Minaj blackface. Anyway, I guess You're So Loud was upset that Jenna Marbles was cancelled and thought that the community didn't care for its creators. In any case, she left and said that she would not be returning because she didn't want to get canceled like Jenna Marbles, which is kind of a little bit fishy, honestly. But who's to say, you know? Rhett and Link were Christians. This is probably not surprising, but Rhett and Link were raised in a Southern Baptist environment in North Carolina for most of their lives. They actually started out being entertainers by doing Christian music for their church, and also for the internet Christian youth program Jelly Telly as the fabulous Bentley brothers who sang about the books of the Bible. Watch Ear Biscuits if you want to hear about specifics regarding their Christian upbringing, but in summary, Rhett and Link were Christians for most of their lives. You may notice I said were. Well, that's because Rhett and Link's spiritual deconstruction. In 2020, Rhett and Link both had a very public falling out with their faith, or rather, they decided to discuss their falling out on Ear Biscuits. It was really a big deal because no one had seen them discuss their faith so intimately, and it caused a really large backlash in the Christian community, and I'm sure many Rhett and Link fans who thought of them as some wholesome Christian internet hosts jumped ship as well. If you've watched this channel for a bit, my channel, you won't be surprised to know that I'm a Christian fella, as I've mentioned it many times when it comes up. And of course, I was disappointed to hear how badly they feel they were wronged by their faith. Personally, I think a lot of it came from them being brought up in a really strict Southern Baptist community where there's a lot of judgment and not any room for disagreement. So once they were in a non-religious environment in California, they weren't really comfortable in their faith to allow other ideas to come through, or realize that they could have been taught incorrect things by people who thought incorrect things. This obviously isn't a religious or political channel, so I won't go too much into it, but I will say that I'm genuinely happy that they found a belief system they're comfortable with, and I think that them being open with their audience was a very good thing, and ultimately led to a lot of good. Link can't be trusted with sharp things. Alright, this is definitely a tonal shift, but yeah, it is a running joke that Link cannot be handed sharp things because I guess he isn't careful enough with them and will become a danger to himself and others. This even goes as far as when he's given little flag things for the game. Somehow he'll always find a way to be a danger to those around him. I think this stems from a story Rhett and Link told where Link cut himself trying to open a Christmas present with his father-in-law, and then passed out because he couldn't handle the blood and him being cut. Link is neurodivergent. A very common assumption with Link especially, given his unique tastes and unorthodox temperament on the show, or with stories he tells on the show, like what I just said about him passing out from cutting himself by accident. Folks think Link either has autism or OCD. In fact, Rhett on the first episode of Good Mythical Morning flat out states that Link has OCD. But at the time, OCD was kind of a catch-all term, so I'm not sure how serious he was with that. I don't know if it's ever been confirmed, but it's clear from stories on Ear Biscuits and GMM that Link has some degree of neurodivergency. Then again, I'm not a doctor or anything, I'm just around a ton of neurodivergent folks all the time, so I probably just see everyone as being that in some way, but nevertheless, it's something that folks talk about and hasn't been specifically confirmed yet, so. GMM fell off. A sadly common community thought, basically the point it falls off, changes depending on whoever you ask, but many people do believe that at some point GMM stopped being as good as it used to be. If you really want to hear my thoughts on that, I'll direct you again to my analysis video, but in short, I think this just comes down to the show changing and evolving over its decade-long run, and people having nostalgia for how things used to be, or just not being intrigued with the current topics that they discuss and the activities that they do. Which is totally fine, but it probably doesn't actually speak to the quality itself of the show, as they probably think it does. Alright, and this is going to be the end of part 1, everyone. Please let me know if you think things should be added, or if I made any mistakes. Soon we'll be discussing Tier 3, the analysis, and Tier 4, the dissection. But until then, thank you all for watching. And I will see all you in the next video, which is going to be this next part. Goodbye.
I want to know so bad. I got a good job. I work hard for my money. When it's quitting time, I hit the door running. I fire up my pickup truck and let the horses run. I go flying on that highway to the hideaway. Stuck out in the woods to do the boot scoot boogie. I had a license plate on the front of my truck.